Look at those names. When you look down that list of people.
Yeah, it's a bit of a who's who, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just... a lot of my heroes in the sport and have ended up becoming not only crewmates but great friends too, which is a neat thing. Once you've been a part of one of Blake's crews, you're always part of a special select group, there's a lot of mutual respect there.
So Peter is he's been dead for a number of years, and yet his shadow is still across the nation in lots of ways. He's left an indelible mark.
Well, it's nice that you say that. I think that's great. That's the greatest tribute you can pay to somebody after they've gone, is that their influence is still here, even though they're no longer here physically. And that's the living the legacy. That's the inspiration piece that I think was part of my motivation for trying to write the book, for my engagement with and contribution to the Sir Peter Blake Trust and helping here with the Maritime Museum thing. But also, I think I'd point out that, of course, for those of us who are old enough to have been around during Sir Peter's times, we still remember that quite vividly, even though the America's Cup win in San Diego with all the Red Sox campaign and that. I mean, gosh, that was nearly 15 years ago. And what we need to recognise is that for every New Zealander who's under 15 years of age, and increasingly as time goes on, they didn't have that privilege.
Mark, we all knew Sir Peter was a great yachtsman, but you've actually dwelt more on other aspects of his character. It's not just as a yachtsman that you look at him in this book.
No, you're right. I dwelt quite a lot, I guess, as a number of New Zealanders did after Peter's death, on what a great tragedy and what a great loss. But I also spent quite a lot of time thinking about, well, what was it that made him so successful and so special? And what I came to realise is that actually it wasn't his abilities as a yachtsman that made him so special. It was his leadership ability. And that was really the genesis for the book, if you like, of recognising that I had been privileged to have a number of unique experiences in a couple of his teams. And I felt that I really wanted to share some insights into what made him such a great leader.
Because you had very direct experience of his leadership. You were Dr. Clutch, weren't you?
Yeah, well, yes, amongst other things. But yeah, I was one of the new boys, and I wasn't unique. That Blake gave a lot of opportunities to younger Kiwi yachtsmen and yachtswomen coming through, and he made it, I think, almost a deliberate decision to include new blood in each of his teams. And I was lucky enough that I was one of those new guys way back in 1988 preparing for the Whitbread. And so that was my first exposure to Peter personally. I'd known him, of course, as one of my heroes growing up, as a kid who fell in love with the sport of sailing. But to have the opportunity to realise that childhood dream with my childhood hero was just an enormous privilege, and something that I'm eternally grateful for.
When you meet a hero like that, did he live up to your expectations?
I suppose, yeah, there's a temptation to put people on pedestals, isn't there? And certainly there were parts of Peter that met my expectations and even exceeded my expectations, and there were other parts which I learned that he struggled with. And in some ways that made it even better, because I recognised that he was human, and he had his strengths and weaknesses just like we all do. And there are things that he struggled with just like things I struggle with. And so from that point of view, it really allowed me to develop an even deeper sense of respect, that he was not the perfect person, he wasn't the perfect leader, nobody is. But what he did do is he was able to utilise everything that God gave him to the best of his ability, and really that's all any of us can do in life.
The longest chapter in the book's on team building. Was that his secret weapon, his ability to build a team?
I think that was one of the greatest attributes, and certainly the most critical success factor for Sir Peter Blake was his ability to build great teams. I don't want to overstate it, but perhaps it's analogous to the sort of camaraderie and teamwork that you find in soldiers in wartime, where you recognise that the decisions you make and the performance that you have is not just important, it's actually critical for people's safety. And when you're sailing on the edge in the Southern Ocean, and if you make a mistake, people can get hurt and people can die, and you're aware of that. So that brings you very close together. It makes you very conscious of your responsibilities to your teammates, and it also makes you conscious of their responsibilities to you and your safety. And that is, I think, a very, very important factor in why offshore sailing teams can become so incredibly close, or in some cases actually can be quite divided by the end of it.
One of the things you talk about in the book is his New Zealandness. The fact that he was a New Zealander made him the sort of leader that he was. Is it inherent in making a good team? Is that New Zealand number 8 wire mentality?
New Zealand has a history of an approach to team building and team performance which shows us that when we do things which take the best from our culture and apply them in a competitive environment, we can beat teams that are better resourced, that are more experienced, perhaps even more talented. We can beat them because we take what we've got and what nobody else has, and that's our New Zealandness. In my view, every child in New Zealand should be proud of and intimately know not just who Sir Edmund Hillary was, or Sir Peter Blake was, or Ernest Rutherford, or Kate Shepherd, or Riwi Ali, but they should actually know also the essence of what they did and how they did things. What was special about their New Zealand approach to leadership and challenge and success? Because that's where we can take some pride and inspiration and incorporate that into our own lives. That's what I'd love to see happen. And I think that New Zealand is now of an age and a time where we need to start doing that more.